Can we have a word about the situation?
The House meets this Saturday to respond to a situation of great gravity. We are here because for the first time for many years, British sovereign territory has been invaded by a foreign power. After several days of rising tension in our relations with Argentina, that country's armed forces attacked the Falkland Islands yesterday and established military control of the islands. The government has now decided that a large task force will sail as soon as all preparations are complete.
And that didn't take long. Enthusiasm for the idea of a task force was overwhelming, both from the public, as expressed in the opinion polls, and among the people involved directly. Everyone pitched in, ratings, pilots, medical teams, to get the ships away as fast as possible. The Defence Secretary, Mr. Knott, went down to Portsmouth to see for himself how the preparations were going. He'd been put very much on the spot by Argentina's action. In the House of Commons, he was accused of gross dereliction of duty for leaving the Falklands so defenceless. He'd offered the Prime Minister his resignation, but she persuaded him to stay on, and the responsible turn of events was taken finally by the Foreign Secretary, Lord Carrington.
There's no doubt about it that what happened in the Falkland Islands has been a great national humiliation. That some of us knew the difficulty of defending the Falkland Islands. You couldn't ever say so, of course, because it was an invitation to the Argentines to do it. The fact that some of us knew it, and nobody else did, has obviously made the shock for those who didn't very much greater. Now, I have been in charge of foreign policy. And as I say, the judgment was wrong about whether we were going to do it. Now, I don't think it's right in those circumstances that you behave as if nothing has happened and go on. And I thought that the honourable thing to do was resign, and I've done it.
Y la primer ministro anuncia oficialmente la partida del grueso de la fuerza aeronaval, cuyo objetivo es la recuperación de las islas.
Relatives and friends one might have expected. Covering the story for BBC Television News that day, and as it happened for the next 10 dramatic weeks, was reporter Brian Hanrahan.
The fleet is moving with the government's warning that it's ready to use it in anger. I'll be sailing aboard HMS Hermes and sending back reports as and when naval secrecy allows. The departure astonished everybody. Men who'd been sweating in their working clothes to get the ships loaded rushed away to change into their best uniforms so they could stand on deck as Invincible led the way south. This was the big stick, we thought.
Admiral Fieldhouse's old ship, HMS Hermes, spearheads British task group. Designed to carry to battle the Royal Marine Commando Brigade with their necessary assault helicopters, she was packed with 7 extra Sea Harriers and a squadron of anti-submarine Sea King helicopters. Most of the brigade would follow in the cruise liner Canberra. Sombre crowds bade farewell as behind followed the more modern cruiser carrier HMS Invincible. Instead of 5 Sea Harriers, she now carried 8, but the task group's 20 Sea Harriers would be outnumbered 10-1 by the Argentinian Air Force. A makeshift naval force boosted by the secret departure from Gibraltar of 9 warships from a NATO exercise.
And once it had been waved convincingly, we could all come back again. The only uncertainty in most minds was how far we'd need to go. Hermes, a tough old warrior, followed. But despite her age and craggy appearance, she had the best communications. She would be the flagship of the most powerful fleet Britain had ever put to sea. Crowds, the flags, genuine warmth came from the shoring waves. Like before, and more than one came close to tears. The men in the task force had been too busy preparing for sea to think about what was happening, but it was as though those who stayed behind realized instinctively. The feeling of support back home was to remain a powerful source of comfort throughout the campaign.
I felt very sad, but also very, very proud, very British, and please God, they pulled it off.
Well, I think it gave me a thrill to think that we're still British. And here we are, and the full Navy is now in full force to give them some stick.
Sir Galahad left Britain next day, her name now synonymous with the task force's worst disaster. The amphibious landing ship HMS Fearless would spearhead the assault on the beaches of San Carlos. The North Sea ferry Norland carried the 2nd Parachute Battalion to its decisive battles on the Falklands.
It's too much reeling in. 5 degrees either side should be plenty. This course 185, speed 18 knots. 18.
This was a war the Navy hadn't expected, hadn't prepared for, and hadn't planned. Much had to be improvised as they went along. Battle roundels were painted on the planes. Other white patches which attracted attention were covered over. But if the warm sunshine on deck suggested a casual atmosphere, the crowded hangar below showed ample evidence of serious intent. The maintenance technicians had to work out routines for looking after twice as many aircraft as were normally on board, and to keep them flying at all times. The task force sailed with only 20 Harriers to oppose an air force with 10 times as many planes. It couldn't afford to have any that were unserviceable. It was the same with the helicopters. They were nowhere near enough for the array of tasks laid upon them. They could hardly be spared for routine servicing. The maintenance men were the hidden heroes, only rarely glimpsing the outside world as they strained to give the pilots a proper chance to exercise their skills.
Right, domestics out of the way, £1,000 HEMC bomb checks. This is the meat of the sortie, so get this part right. First of all, checks when you get out to the airplane. Security, check that the old bomb is not about to fall off. Rattle it. Then check on the bomb itself. Check the tail, must be secure, tightly fastened to the bomb. The spinner will be locked. Try the old vanes at the back, make sure they're not free to rotate, otherwise it could already be armed. And check that the tail isn't already opened. Okay, retard tail, don't forget, 117. Fusing, 3 lanyards. 1 electrical for the Mark 951 fuse which we're using, the lanyard to the arming lock lever, and finally the lanyard to the retarder. And they're in that order, front to back. So check all 3. And then make the nose-tail fusing anyway, because it's good practice. Don't forget, if you can't get rid of it on the usual pickle button, you can always hit the clear aircraft button, get rid of it that way. But it is on the centerline pylon, so if needs be, bring it back home. If something should go wrong and the bomb explodes, I can't help you, you're on your own. Okay, so just think about the sort of things that you might possibly get.